I'm Dick Miller, and today, guess what? I'm with Jeff. Jeff, how are you today?
That was a quick introduction, Dick.
Well,
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I said we were going to wing it today, didn't I?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. We'll have to congratulate Jeff. He just finished an election, and I talked to him, I think a day or two after his election. It sounded like he was either completely worn out or the whole thing was anticlimactic.
Yeah, well, win or lose, and I've lost and I've won in different elections. And a campaign is so involved that when you hit election day or the next day after election day, it's like dropping off a cliff. All of a sudden you don't have things to do that the energy kind of catches up to you. You realize, wow, I put so much into that. And
it's just kind of like the adrenaline is just all gone.
Now what do you do, right?
Yeah.
So we are now, 10 or 11 days past the election day, and that week immediately following election day was more of a take a deep breath, and gather yourself up and collect signs and do the things you have to do, but otherwise get some well-needed sleep, and then start looking forward.
Good. Looking forward is a good thing. You want to give us an overview of the outcome of this election here in Wisconsin?
I know a lot of people we're tired of it, and a lot of people would say there was too much negativity. And I wouldn't disagree, and they would say some of it came from me even. But, you do what you can to tell the truth. I do anyway. And so people know what their choices are. And that's, to me, very important. You're not always going to get all the information you need about someone to make a really educated decision. And I hope there were, in my case, there were just enough people that supported me to keep me in the office for 4 more years. And so we will move forward with that. And I will suggest this. My opponent, who did call me just yesterday and concede, made the comment to me that he wanted to be sure I knew that there was more to this district than just Eau Claire. And of course, I live in Eau Claire County. I don't live in the city of Eau Claire. I live in Eau Claire County. I know all too well how important it is that the rest of my district, which is rural, gets most of my attention, and it truly does. It has been that way for a long time. I know the city of Eau Claire and even the school district of Eau Claire is a different animal from the rest of my district. I have 22 school districts I count within my district, for instance, and I meet regularly with the 21 rural school district superintendents, and they could tell you that I've organized a monthly group meeting with all of them at one time, and Eau Claire is a separate animal entirely, and I get that. So I thought that was good advice, though, and a reminder that that is important. To all of us, because rural Wisconsin is struggling to compete with our high population bases, which really are Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, La Crosse, Green Bay, the Fox Valley entirely. So we've got to be standing up for ourselves and make sure the state of Wisconsin realizes that what are we known for? We're known for the beauty of our landscape, our water that we have here, the recreation we have here, and the tourism that it brings, and that's important. So on that note, by the way, first thing I've had a tourism council. I'm a member of the tourism council. We had a conference this week, as a matter of fact, and tourism's actually doing really well in Wisconsin. People after the pandemic, I think, wanted to get out, and we've done a good job of reminding them that Wisconsin's a great place to visit.
Well, I want to commend you that since you were elected 4 years ago to the Senate, and now again this time, that you have been open to anybody's communication. And I know, I see your truck parked at various places that you want to talk to the people. And I think your opponent this time certainly is good to remind you, but I think I want to remind the people that are listening that I think over the last 4 years you have gone out of your way to communicate with people in this district, and I commend you for that. I don't know that everybody has done that in the past, but I think what's more important is what's happening now, of course.
No, I've actually drawn some attention, as you know, Dick, for doing that. But I think it's, there is that discussion about whether we're part-time or full-time. I consider this a full-time job, and if I'm going to be a full-time legislator, that means when I'm not in Madison, I should be somewhere where people are able to engage with me and share their ideas and thoughts about what's going on. So that, for me, means parking my truck and putting that sign up there to stop and talk to me.
Yeah.
We will try to do a much better job. Once I say better, I think we did do a pretty good job over the previous 3 years, and then this election year is a whole different thing and is random. But when I am back now into a regular policy position, we will try to do a good job of making sure people know ahead of time, at least within 24 hours or so, where I'll be with that truck, so that they can maybe stop and talk to me, because I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, well, not everybody does who's in the legislature, and I'm glad you do, especially since you represent those of us in this particular Senate district. In terms of the overall election in the Assembly and the Senate, I think one Democrat senator lost his position, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, we lost the 25th. That was Janet Bewley, who retired, and it was an open seat, and it's been trending a different way up there in northern Wisconsin, and so we are at a disadvantage of 11 Democrats to 22 Republicans in the state Senate right now.
Yeah. Now the House or the Assembly, did it stay basically the same?
It stayed pretty close to the same, and I don't know the exact numbers. I know they lost actually the two Democrats in that same Senate district, which is what were the numbers, 73 and 4 or something like that, but out of Ashland and out of Superior up there. So they lost those two seats, and I don't think they gained any, but they still don't have the supermajority issue in the House that we have in the Senate.
What I find so interesting, and of course we've discussed this, I'm sure, at some point in these shows, that this 2 years ago, President Biden took Wisconsin. So it took a majority of votes for him to take Wisconsin. And yet you look at our state Senate and Assembly, and it is not 50-50 in terms of representation. And I just mentioned that. I may want to touch upon this a little later if we could.
Sure. And over time, you've heard, if you watch this and listen to me at any time, I'm always going to mention gerrymandering is an unfortunate situation of legislators drawing the lines that determine whether they stay in their position. And it is unfortunate, and also, but you need to remember that we are a republic and a democratic republic, and that means the majority rules. Just like elections, and who gets the most votes wins, and the same goes with the majority in the legislature as in Congress. So whatever party has the most seats controls basically everything that happens, and it including what the president at the national level or the governor at the state level actually gets to their desk that they sign or veto. It is so important, and I don't think people realize that, the attention is always focused on that top of the ticket, the governor or the president, but they can't do anything that the legislature or Congress doesn't send to them. And so it is really critically important who has the majority in those places. So I want to keep reminding people of that, why it's important to vote in every election, and to pay attention to whether or not, if you're not satisfied with the way things are going, it's, remember who is in charge.
Well, if I remember my Civics 101 back many years, all laws start with a bill. And the bill starts in Wisconsin in the Assembly or in the Senate. And before a governor, or in the case of a president, before they even have a chance to sign it, it has to pass those houses.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're telling us,
Yeah.
I think. And a governor or a president can ask one of the members of those bodies to submit a bill, but they don't have any, their only final control is once it gets to them.
That's right. And so going back to what you just brought up, is we are like a 50-50 state. We really are.
Mm-hmm.
We're considered this battleground state, which is something we should actually wear with the
Mm-hmm.
badge of honor. It's kind of a badge of honor. The whole nation watches Wisconsin, what happens here when it comes to the national elections. But at the same time, because we're gerrymandered, we have 2/3 of our seats taken by one party, even though the governor is a Democrat who won his statewide election. The Attorney General won the statewide election, Democrat. In fact, most statewide elections in the past 4 years have gone to Democrats, and yet the Republicans have 2/3 of the seats in the legislature because they've been able to manipulate the districts so that they favor them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's been interesting during this last election period. Various states have had propositions that the electors, those of us who go to vote, and can decide upon. I think like in California it's called a proposition. Some places it's called a ballot proposition or initiative. Ballot initiative.
Citizen initiatives, yeah.
I was reading that 24 states have one of those in their law, in their law books or in their constitution. And interestingly enough, the most recent state to add that was either Mississippi or Alabama. I don't recall which one. I think Mississippi maybe. And so that if there is a strong enough, well, actually it's not necessarily a majority, but a large enough number of people who want this on the ballot, they can get names, signatures, and then put it on the ballot. And what's so nice about that, maybe there's some negatives, but I'll mention the nice thing about it, and it's been used a lot by Democrats in recent years, where there has been apparently in many cases a majority of people who disagree with what the majority of legislators in that state want. And so they go over their head, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, I think there are times I think that safeguard is not a bad thing.
It is not. I think we want to be careful if we enter that realm of the citizen initiatives to not be a California. I don't think any of us want 100 propositions on our ballot.
Well, maybe it's too easy to fill out the forms.
There's a different, there's ways of doing this, though, to make sure you hit certain levels.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan actually got fair maps and away from this gerrymandering just a few years ago, so that this was like their first election to see to run this through fair maps by citizen initiative. that was actually really kind of cool how they collected a million signatures or whatever they did and got it on the ballot, and this is what the people wanted, and now it's law. Same thing has happened in states around marijuana. And you know, here we are surrounded now as a state by states who have one form of marijuana legality or another, medical for certain, and a couple that have recreational marijuana, but we can't seem to get it through to a vote in the state of Wisconsin. So it gives the citizens a chance to have their say, because I just mentioned two things, fair maps and marijuana. If you look at state, county referendums, because there are county referendums happening that are advisory, it's vastly, the vast majority support those things to happen, and yet politics gets in the way. Politics gets in the way of good policy.
Well, and to define fair maps, we're basically saying they're drawn by an independent body, not by the legislators.
That's right.
So they're drawn for we would hope, rather than political lines, they're drawn in terms of a given geographic area and not the squigglies.
Right.
More of the straight lines.
And with some parameters in there to be sure that there is as close a balance as you can get between the way people vote. And you can do that through history. It's not that anyone knows you specifically how you vote when you go into a polling place, but over time there's a historical evaluation of how your block votes and that sort of thing. And that's how they do it now, by making sure that they draw those lines to determine it favors one place or the other.
Well, and the initiatives or propositions, we'll call them, really are probably not going to show up very often on the ballot if you have fair mapping, because you're going to have people who, if that majority in that district feel that they are the balanced district you referred to, they feel that their representative is not voting their wishes. If it's balanced, they can vote him out or her out the next time.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and that isn't the way it is now.
There's a statistic that I like to relay to people as often as I can to accentuate what we're talking about. And that is that since the redistricting happened in 2011, there's two statistics actually. There has not even come close to a change in leadership in the legislature. And the previous decade, 5 out of 5 cycles, 5 election cycles, 3 times majorities changed hands in the legislature. 3 out of 5.
So due to dissatisfaction or whatever.
Right. So, you know, the winds change, you know, the way people feel about things, and they are able to change that through the ballot. Can't do that right now, not with the way things are drawn.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And another very important to me statistic is this. Since the Republicans have been in control, Democratic bills introduced by Democrats have only a 1% chance of getting a public hearing. And I'm one of the, I've introduced over 100 bills. I've had 1 hearing. And the statistic is actually like, I think 1.9% of bills introduced by Democrats get a public hearing. A public hearing doesn't mean something passes. It just means you, the public, get to have some say in the bills that are being introduced by having a hearing. That's all.
Can you tell us, do you know what the percentage might be on the majority side?
So, well, they get all their bills get public hearings if they want them.
You know, and I'm going to editorialize here just a second. believe me, even Democrats have good ideas once in a while.
Well, we both do, and I'll give
Absolutely.
you, so I'll even add to that. I was fortunate enough to serve in the majority when I was in the state assembly in that first decade of this century for 2 years. We had 1 2-year term when we were in the majority. 80% of the bills Republicans introduced got public hearings.
So the leadership,
80%.
the Democratic leadership, opened the door and said, "It's worth listening to or looking at."
We just thought that was the way things.
Yeah.
And it is up to committee chairs.
And that is
to have the public hearing. So
and
committee
that's
chairs.
the majority party
That's always the majority party. Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, it doesn't have to be the way it is. It does not have to be the way it is. Even if you're in the majority, just offer the opportunity to have public hearings on ideas, which I'm more than willing to say, you like my idea? You can have it. Put your name on it if it's that important to you to take credit for everything. Let's just at least have the hearings and let's move on and get good things happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you were out campaigning this round, so to speak, you knocked at what, 1,000 doors?
Oh,
2,000 doors?
oh, way more than that, I'm afraid.
Now,
thousands of doors.
Thousands of doors.
And I don't know the number, but it's up there.
It was a lot. I bet it was. And can you tell me in your discussion with the various people out there in the district, did you pick up a lot of information that led you to believe that maybe there was some misunderstandings the way the system operates? I know you touched on one here just a minute ago.
There really is. And it's frustrating because for me personally, and I can bring it right down to one gentleman I talked to on the Friday before election, and I knocked on his door. Statistically, he has been voting as an independent, and had nice conversation, nice gentleman. We had no problem. He asked me a couple questions, asked me who my opponent was. I told him he hadn't heard of him before, and that's important because then he said to me, "Jeff, I just want to tell you that this election I'm going to vote Republican, up and down the line, the whole way." Oh, but yet you know me, but you don't know my opponent. Okay. Well, that really had me thinking about this. Because what people need to know is, because then I said why, and he said, because I just don't like the way things are going. And I heard that a lot. Now, generally, when they say that, they mean nationally, because that's the news they get and all the things they get, and the inflation or whatever it is. I think we need to have some real conversations about that. Because over the last 30 years in the state of Wisconsin, 28 to be honest, since the 1994 red wave in the midterms of the Clinton administration, the Republicans have controlled our state legislature 26 out of those 28 years. Only the 2 years that I mentioned that we were in the majority. That's in the assembly. I really haven't picked out the statistics. I have to look closer at for the state senate, but it's somewhere close to that. They've had control of our state legislature, which goes back to no matter who the governor is, it's the state legislature that determines what happens in our state. So when someone says, I'm going to vote a certain way because I don't like the way things are going, I want to ask them, well, do you know how it actually works and who has been in charge before you make your decision? And do you know who you're actually voting for, each individual? Instead of just going right down the line, you need to maybe look a little closer. And I know that's asking a lot. That's asking a lot of people because people are busy.
Well, and I think, you think about it, the governor or the president, if I think this is an interesting situation on the national level. We've had for 2 years we've had the president and both houses of the same party, and in a way, if you're not happy, you can blame the party or that group that's in power. But now we're going to have a house that is a different party, Republican Party, and here we have a situation where, in a way, it's a little bit like what we have here in the state. You can't blame the guy sitting up in the Oval Office, so to speak, if nothing gets done. But I know we've heard that here in Wisconsin, that the governor is given heck because nothing's happening or they're not happy with him. And yet, as you said earlier, he has no control other than signing or vetoing a bill.
So
and
remember, during the pandemic in 2020, the year of 2020, our legislature took a pause. The Republican leaders sent us away, and we didn't come back until 2021. Over 300 days, we did not do anything.
No action at all.
No action. And now we have a $5 billion surplus that we've been sitting on most of this year already because of politics, with the Republicans hoping they were going to change the governor's seat, which they did not. And so I think the big question is now, can we work together to be sure we get things done? Now, of course, we have both houses still in Republican hands, so that's one thing. But you make a good point. We'll watch Washington see how the two parties controlling one house, one party controlling one house and one party controlling the other. See if they can figure this out now and finally work together and get something done.
Well, we hope so. Do you want to speculate on what we're going to see in the Senate here this next year? When does the session start?
So we are officially starting January 3rd. That's, of course, is swearing-in day, and not a lot, nothing really happens that day, but that's officially when things start. And everything that we did before has to be reintroduced, or did not pass in the past year, has to be reintroduced if you want it to pass the next time. It's a whole new start all over type of thing every time for every 2-year session. So I'm going to say that the most important thing we're going to be focused on is the budget, which is always the case, but of course this $5 billion surplus that we have and how we can work together with the Republicans in charge of the legislature and the governor in the governor's house and make sure that we are doing the people's work.
I want to thank you, Jeff. We're coming to an end again, and it goes fast.
Yeah.
So we'll try to be back around maybe a little towards the first of the year, maybe.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being with us.